Welcome, everybody. I think I got some slides. You guys have those? My wife's actually Bambi, so I'm thrilled to have this event in Oakland. It's actually where I was born. I was born right up the street, and it's great to see so much energy brought here. And raise your hand if this room is a lot more attractive than you thought this morning when you got up about where you were coming to in Oakland. So we're changing perceptions, one view at a time. So I give a talk. Go forward, one. Do you have those slides or not? Oh, you didn't get any slides? No, I can just do it from memory. It's fine. That's cool. No worries. So I give a talk at the Kauffman Foundation. The Kauffman Foundation is kind of a boot camp for startups, for venture capitalists. And the talk is about portfolio optionality and thinking about a lot of the things you just mentioned, the investor guy over there, about how do you sort of think about diversifying your portfolio, not just from where you invest, but the strategies and how you invest from a strategic standpoint. I actually wanted to reverse the talk for entrepreneurs and think about diversifying the way you think about building your business. So there's a great quote from Steve Blank, and he says, I'm pulling this from memory, it's the first slide of the presentation. Essentially, a startup is a temporary organization in search of a repeatable business model. And I think that's a great way to think about startups. You don't think of the startup, and obviously that's not kind of in the Jim Collins built to last. We're building enduring enterprises for 200 years. That's for large corporations. Startups are temporary organizations in search of a repeatable business model. They're fundamentally about creating a new innovation, finding a gap in the market, and then being able to capitalize on that gap. But I recommend to keep your mind open about how you capitalize on that gap. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about commercialization and the way that commercialization, the way startups should begin to think about commercializing. So if we think about, and by the way, what I do for a living is I'm an investment banker. So I advise companies through financings, raising money, all that kind of stuff. Let's unpack the question. If a startup is a temporary organization, what does that mean? What we have in a startup is we have a core innovation. So we have something creative that we've done. The next phase is, how do I commercialize that innovation? How do I take that innovation to market and actually create a repeatable business model in Steve Blank's vernacular? And I think there's a much wider range of options than most startups think about. So we look at the world really through three lenses. If you think about commercialization, you think, how do I build distribution? How do I create monetization? Many startups have a great idea. The next question becomes, how do I get it out there, and how do I make money on it? And it's not always the case that endemically those things fit perfectly out of the gate, that you have perfect form distribution, or that you have endemic monetization. You may have a great idea, but how you get it out there and how you make money on it are two very important questions. So the first question I would ask is, if you're raising capital and you're thinking about commercializing, and I commercialize my innovation, I'm going to go out, the first idea every startup has is, well, I got to go raise money. Remember, probably 85% of the money you raise, if you raise venture capital after seed and A round, 85% of that money is going to go into commercializing your innovation, not into R&D. It's going to go into all the other stuff, extra R&D. It's going to go into sales. It's going to go into marketing. It's going to go into HR. It's going to go into your CEO salary. It's going to go into a whole bunch of stuff that isn't actually the core innovation. That's a ton of money. That's pretty much all the money. So most people have this fantasy that all the money goes into developers. Maybe in the early days it's 50%, but pretty soon the amount of money actually going into creating the innovation is relatively small, and the amount of money going into commercializing the innovation is relatively big. And as you get to the later stage, it becomes enormous amounts of money. So then the question becomes, is the highest and best use of my innovation to commercialize independently, or is the highest and best use of my innovation maybe other forms of commercializing? So for example, we have a talk later today from Sean Jacobson at Emergence Capital about business development. I'm a huge fan of freeloading. Are there ways, as you're thinking about your startup, are there ways that I could essentially find other forms of distribution? Can I find partners who can distribute my product for me, who can get me reach and access? And distribution is writ large. Don't think of distribution as being cereal boxes on shelves. Distribution is getting your brand and your product in front of the consumers that you want to get in front of. So, are there partners in strategic business development places that I can work with? And I would definitely attend Sean's talk later. Places where I can work with other organizations through which I can get distribution. So as a CEO, one question I would ask you as an entrepreneur is, yes, you can go raise money. Yes, you can hire a VP of sales. Yes, you can hire a VP of marketing. They're ridiculously expensive. And you may or may not be assured they're actually going to do a good job. Second question, can you go to Vator Splash? Can you meet the person next to you who already has a bunch of customers that you could take advantage of and figure out a way to do a deal with them and save yourself a lot of money and probably a lot of HR hassle? So just a question. I'm not saying that's the best answer for everybody, but I would definitely think through the question around, are there ways and channels I can use strategic business development to gain distribution if it's not endemic to my innovation? And on the back end, are there ways that I could use partnerships to gain monetization? It's not always the case. There are many, many, many. In fact, I would say the predominant number of innovations in our industry do not have the optimal monetization themselves. They're actually best monetized through some other form. So, for example, you may be able to reach consumers with a new app, but maybe the best thing that you can turn in terms of actually making money on those consumers is selling somebody else's product. So it's not always the case. In fact, very often, as you erect toll booths to make money on a new innovation, you're actually slowing down the core value you're trying to create, which is getting larger and larger reach and aggregating audience and aggregating consumers and aggregating users or aggregating folks. So I'm a huge fan of the freemium model, the idea of getting products out there inexpensively and gaining distribution. Where you place those toll booths, and I can look around, I know many of the companies here, and it's always a question, where do I place the toll booth? Where do I put the point where someone has to pay? And sometimes, optimally, it's not necessarily even inside of your product. It might be something else that you could be thinking about outside of your product, which is where you can, in fact, be able to effectively monetize your company. So as you sit down and say, look, 85% of the money I'm gonna raise to build my business is gonna go into things that aren't fundamentally R&D. They're gonna go into things around distribution and around monetization. And then the ultimate form is being acquired. So I can do it entirely on my own. I can raise money and commercialize. I can do it through partners. That's kind of the next level. Not always easy, but they may be able to bring me distribution. They may be able to bring me monetization. And then ultimately, I can potentially find folks who can acquire my company and bring on a fully integrated basis the full spectrum of potential commercialization opportunities. There are many companies out there that already have the distribution channels, that already have the methods and teams and infrastructure to basically be able to apply your innovation into the market. So it's really hard to do startups. It's really hard to time a startup. It's really hard to figure out when the right time is to get customers. All of those things are tremendously hard. And so what we recommend to our clients is don't approach it with a single question in mind. I got to go raise money, or I'm on the market, I'm shopping my company now, or I ran out of money, now I got to hurry up and figure out how I get bought. Start the whole process with a different question. The question that we recommend starting is, how do I get the resources I need to scale and commercialize my company? And it may be internally, it may be inside of our own organization just through operations, it may be by raising money and self-combusting and building out independent commercialization teams, it may be through strategic business development, and ultimately it may be through partnering. But there's a much wider range of questions you can ask, and what we recommend to our clients is enter the room by asking the question, how do I get the resources I need for scale? And that's a different mindset, I think, than allow a lot of entrepreneurs, particularly first-time entrepreneurs, start the process of either raising money or shopping their company or whatever it is. Don't think about that question. Think about, how do I get the resources I need for scale, either from a partner, from an acquirer, or from an investor, and what's my strategy, and how am I going to think broadly about that strategy? So I think the main point of my talk, and again, they didn't have my slides, which is fine, but the main point of my talk was to sort of change and reorient the question that you ask as you're beginning to think about your resources. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with partnering with companies, nothing wrong with using the existing infrastructure to grow your innovation. In fact, you'll own more of your company, you'll spend less money, and you'll have a much higher probability of success. So That's 90% of the meat of my talk. So I saved probably half the time, and you guys got most of the value. I'm happy to take a couple questions. We're gonna go on to a corporate development panel in a minute, but if there's any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
What areas do you usually invest in?
We're advisors, so we work with all things internet. So we work with our digital, so commerce, media, mobile, those kinds of things. So things where essentially typically companies that have mid-stage kind of evaluating Series B, C, or other alternatives. But that's most of what we do. Anything else? Questions? Last question? All right, good. Drew.